So on our agenda this morning, we're going to do a quick overview of the fund, the goals and parameters that have been set for the fund in statute, the eligibility and investment criteria, and the application process, and take questions and commentary at the end before we adjourn. Let's go to the next slide. So overall, this fund was created through the Climate Solutions Now Act, Senate Bill 528. It's now Chapter 38 in law. It was created with the goal of increasing private capital investment in technology, deployment, and development intended to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, mitigating the impact of climate change in Maryland. The bill allocated a mandated fund of over $15 million, but that's coming in 3 tranches in the fiscal year that just is current, fiscal 24, 25, and 26. There are very specific eligibility measures to, and I won't read them to you, but as you can see, the intention is to facilitate the deployment of solutions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and advance clean energy technology in the marketplace. It is also very specifically referencing the potential creation of a Maryland Green Bond program that would fund additional investment in these measures. This fund does not allow for investment in fossil fuel generating energy solutions. Let's go to the next slide. I want to mention that 40% of the funds are specified to be used to assist low-income households and communities in the state to access decarbonization solutions and strategies. But there is a caveat so that the funds are not sitting idle in the time where we really need to be addressing climate change as rapidly as possible. If there is not a quota met with applications and proposals for the use of those funds for that purpose, the statute does allow the Investment Oversight Committee to deploy the funds in an immediate way so that we're not sitting on funds that could be making a difference quickly. Not more than 5% of the fund balance can be used for administrative purposes. That includes any financial advisory services that we are currently soliciting for. And I mentioned earlier that the fund cannot be used for fossil fuels or to improve the efficiency of existing fossil fuel generating equipment or heating equipment. Let's go to the next slide. So the fund can consist of a number of sources of revenue, not just the state funding, but we can utilize federal grant funding through the C3 vehicle. We can take private contributions, philanthropic grants and gifts, proceeds from the sale, disposition, lease, rental of collateral related to financing made available from the fund. So as we generate revenue, we can put it back into the fund. Repayment of financings made from the fund. It is intended to be an evergreen investment vehicle. Interest earning on the fund, and we are investing those funds in interest earning accounts as they are waiting to be deployed. And we really want to emphasize that we're interested in partnering with investors who want to use this vehicle advantageously, either for tax purposes, but to achieve the intended outcomes for the use of the resources. Could we go to the next slide, please? So we do have the first $5 million tranche in hand. As I mentioned, we're earning interest on that now. We will anticipate the additional $5 million contribution in 2025 and in fiscal 2026. And we've covered the private and public sources. So let's go to the next slide. So there is an investment oversight committee that is appointed by the board of directors of the Maryland Clean Energy Center, which is appointed by the governor and approved by the Senate Executive Nominations Committee. This investment oversight committee has certain responsibilities. They are to evaluate and coordinate financing for the purposes specified, to facilitate the use of the funds for tax equity purposes where appropriate, to secure private investment capital for financing of qualified projects. And this is an important note here. The idea is that these funds are to be leveraged. So we're looking for how can we take the public money and multiply it significantly to make a bigger impact than what just the fund itself would allow. The Investment Oversight Committee is able to make grants to other green banks in the state for the purposes of financing qualified projects as appropriate. And they will administer the fund and activities of the center in carrying out this part of the statute. They have been appointed. We are pleased to say that the Investment Oversight Committee is currently chaired by Comptroller Brooke Learman, and we have 11 members of the Investment Oversight Committee that have been appointed, all very qualified, and their bios are available on the website of the MCEC and the C3 Capital Fund if you'd like to learn more about those members. Let's go to the next slide. So as we mentioned, the qualification of low income and disadvantaged communities, we are using the definition in the CSNA statute, or the Climate Solutions Now statute, for the purposes of the grant program. And the definition of a low income household is at or below 175% of the federal poverty level. And the definition of a moderate income household is greater than 175% of the federal poverty level, but below 85% of the median income by county. There is a link to the US EPA EJ Screener tool and the MDE EJ Screener tool provided on the slide and on the website that will allow you to map the physical location or to qualify a project within a designated Justice 40 community, or a community that meets these criteria for low income description. Let's go to the next slide. So there's certain performance outcomes and metrics that we are monitoring with regard to reporting on the use of the C3 Investment Fund resources. Again, we're looking at how has the fund successfully been able to leverage greater investment than what is in it. We are certainly looking at the qualified greenhouse gas reduction from the investment of the money. We are looking at clean energy deployment and the in that space with regard to solar, wind, the electrification solutions that are deployed using these investments. Energy efficiency demand reduction and cost savings would be important there too. The number and scope of low-income households impacted by the proposed use of the investments, and the community resilience and equity impacts that might result from the investment in a project or program through the C3 fund. And then again, the ability to stand up a green bond program, how that investment would result in that outcome. Thank you. Let's go to the next slide. Stephen's going to talk a little bit about the proposed investment vehicles.
Sure. Thanks, Kathy. We have quite a bit of flexibility sort of within the guidelines Kathy outlined earlier. So we envision that the C3 fund will have a number of what we consider sort of sub-funds or sub-investment vehicles, as you can see there on page 10. A revolving loan fund, an equity investment fund, a block grant program, and a capacity building grant program as well. It's important to note here that we're also interested in proposals and ideas of parties that may want to contribute capital into the fund alongside MCEC. So we're looking for co-investors, co-lenders, co-grant participants as appropriate. And again, there, as mentioned earlier, 40% of the fund balance needs to be directed to OI households and communities.
Yeah, and just to reiterate on that is a priority for the use of the funds. We will, as we're reviewing proposals, we'll be looking for that. That's not to say that a proposal could not include that audience and still be funded, but we are looking to meet that quota. And as we look at revolving loan fund, we are looking at that not just as lending, but that can also be used as credit enhancement, subsidies, gap financing, that would make a difference in whether or not a project would happen. The equity investment fund concept, we will do equity and equity-like investments through that tool. We do envision the need to make some grants, and we understand that there are projects or investments that just otherwise aren't going to happen without grant funding, and that particularly as we're trying to serve a certain underserved cohort. And with regard to capacity building, what we're looking at is helping communities who may otherwise not have projects designed or in a fund-ready position, who need technical support to help get a vision ready for funding, right? From idea to implementation, what is needed. So there may be a need for some technical support or engineering to project management to help get something that is envisioned to help a community in a significant way, or a number of communities get to the point where it's ready for funding. Let's go to the next slide. So as we look at the eligibility and investment criteria that we'll be measuring, and the application is structured to help, as you apply, ask that you address these criteria. We're looking at how does it fit within the state climate action plan and policy. And the categories that are listed here, you'll see align with the plan and what the plan has outlined, where technology specifically will address greenhouse gas reduction. We are looking at the program fit. How does this investment align with the four, let's call it buckets of investment that we've envisioned, or is it a new bucket that would be creative and worthy of consideration? How does the proposed investment overlap or align with the commercial PACE programs that are operating in many of the counties throughout the state, or could leverage MCEC's ability to issue taxable and tax-exempt bonds through our Maryland Capital or Clean Energy Capital Program, MCAP. And this could also be true of our current program in partnership with Montgomery County Green Bank to serve single-family homeowners with energy improvements through the Clean Energy Advantage portal that is in place. We're also looking at innovative technology and innovative technology's ability to make a difference in the marketplace. This is not to say that the proposals for investment have to be specifically commercial off-the-shelf technology, but we want to look at opportunities to help move them further and faster toward the marketplace. The financial performance will be relevant in our evaluation of proposals. Is there a rate of return for the investment, or what is the project, program, or initiative? How will the investment enable further investment or enable outcomes that relate to the financial performance for the use of the fund? Certainly, we're going to consider the size and scale of the investment. We won't rule out the smallest of the smallest investments or the largest of the large. I think it's important to note here that MCEC is also looking at the National Climate Investment Fund resources that should be available through the EPA Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund grant program soon. And could we take an idea that you submit through this portal and leverage those funds to help make it happen? So let's not assume that $5 million is all we have. Let's use this as a way to build a case for further investment, whether it's from federal sources or in partnership with other state resources. So the size and scale certainly doesn't have to be small just because the fund currently is small. But that said, we will look at the total investment. It's unlikely that we will make a grant of $5 million for a single project using this fund at this time, and you should bear that in mind. The cost of investment by type, we're asking you to specify what portion of the proposal that you're submitting you want to be a low-cost loan or an equity investment or a grant, so that we understand how the money would be used for what purposes. We're looking at the anticipated financial return to the C3 fund. If there is a loan and there is interest, when would the interest be, payments be made? So as you're thinking about project proposals, the timing of capital infusions into your project would be important for us to understand. If initially you need a big slug to get somewhere, or you can function on what you have for a while, but at some point you're going to need the larger slug toward the end or toward ready to deploy. We're interested in you telling us that in your proposals. Certainly the anticipated greenhouse gas reductions, that will have to be qualified and measured, and we would like to know how you intend to measure and verify those. The anticipated full-time equivalent contractor hours or jobs created is a relevant metric, so please let us know if you can help us understand how that might be reflected in your project. Certainly the impact on low-income households and communities is a big factor. And then the amount or the type of private sector or other capital that's catalyzed by the investment will be something we'll be looking at as we evaluate project proposals and investment proposals. Next slide, please. We're also looking at the climate adaptation performance, how this investment would demonstrably reduce vulnerability and would impact communities, the level of impact we'll want to look at. Is the project ready to be invested in? Is it going to take some time to deploy the money or to get results from the investment that is being envisioned? Is it a 12-month turnaround? Is it greater than 12 months? We're trying to understand how quickly the money can make a difference. So that too is relevant in the time to completion, from here's our idea to when we think the use of the funds would be wrapped up. Or if you're proposing an evergreen type of investment, let us know that too. And then the primary benefit location for all these projects must be inside Maryland. We can invest with partners from outside of the state. That's not an issue, but the ultimate return on the investment must demonstrably benefit Maryland as a priority. The impact on the environment is a primary benefit that we want to understand, and the impact on energy economics, whether it's by household or by community, that will be helpful to know as well. Next slide, please. And then finally, the application intake and approvals process. We have a link in this deck and on our website to the eligibility and investment criteria and the C3 fund application. I can see that our team is posting that link in the chat right now if you want to grab it. We'll go talk about timeline in just a minute, but we anticipate there will be a 60-day review and approval time frame from the initial application deadline, which I think is April 15th. We'll confirm that in a minute. In fact, let's go to that next slide. We do envision 2 cycles in the immediate future. One where we have announced a call for proposals, which was announced on, I think, late February. We announced that, with proposals due in mid-April. We are in the process of soliciting for financial advisory services between March and April, with the intent of bringing them on in May so that they can be part of the review process for the proposals that we hope to receive. And we will be developing a methodology and criteria for evaluating proposals with their assistance. Our hope is to make a first round of awards. Our plan is to make a first round of awards in mid-June prior to the end of fiscal 24, and then would anticipate the second cycle for the fiscal 25 funding allocation to begin in mid-June. The intent is to get this money working quickly. Stephen, I don't know if you want to add anything about that. I know that you and our team are available to answer questions if somebody's working on their application.
Right, and you'll see in the application, just wanted to mention a note that has been raised by a few on confidentiality of certain, whether it's a financial model, things that are patented technology, things like that is, MCEC obviously observes and will treat confidentially, any information that is submitted through the application in terms of, business plan, financial model, and the like.
Yes, so I see Kabi has a question. Yes, the presentation will be shared afterwards with the people that were on the call and will also be posted on the website. We encourage you to share it with other stakeholders. We are doing some stakeholder outreach to encourage interest and participation in the fund activity. So thank you for that question. We can also take questions out of the chat, or if you just want to raise your hand and we'll try to look for you in the... I know this is a lot to absorb. We're not trying to make this difficult, and we know that everyone who submits will not be able to check all the boxes. The idea is to check as many as possible, but we definitely want to make strategic investments that are going to demonstrate how the fund can be used early, and we encourage you to just inquire if you think that you have an idea or a proposal. We do not want to accept proposals from individual homeowners. That is not the intention for the use of these funds. We're looking for projects that will demonstrate significant impact that could be models for future investment or for other communities. And, we just want to try to maximize the return on investment for the state's resources. We will be happy to talk about capital stack and partner funding and help you look for other funding that you may not be able to see as you develop a proposal. This is sort of a working relationship. We have a couple other questions. I'm going to start with an anonymous attendee. Will you fund the startups that are impacted to develop technology that reduce energy consumption and are impactful? Again, it will depend on the submittal and what you're competing with in the pool. Kabi, you're also asking, can we work with out-of-state partners for project implementation? We'll still be the lead developer. Yes. Again, the primary benefit has to be for Maryland stakeholders. The grant structure is not already defined. This is a little bit of building the plane as you fly it. What we're trying to do is look for good ideas and good concepts and respond to those as we can. Are allocations competitive against each other or evaluated based on their individual merit and allocated on a first come, first serve? No, it is not first come, first serve. I will tell you that. And they're not necessarily evaluated against each other. They're evaluated among the pool within that group in the cycle that are in front of us at the time. We will look to fund as much within a pool as we can, understanding that we may not be able to reduce the amount of the request to fund everything that's in the pool, right? Is climate resilience adaptation of interest for funding? Yes, I think, again, there's a greenhouse gas reduction aspect of this that is important. Would something like implementing a greenway be eligible under this program? I would like a little more clarity on what you mean by greenway, but if it's what I think it is, and you can show measurable greenhouse gas reduction and benefit as a result of, so we're reducing heat island effect, or we're creating a an area where there is community benefit. We would look at those things. So I don't want to say no. Let's see what the proposal is. Could this fund be a source for energy efficient construction methods for affordable housing? Yes, I think so. What is the best way to run our ideas by C3 team prior to application submission? I would say email Stephen. And Stephen, you can put your email address in the chat. It's scowan, CWAN, at mdcleanenergy.org. And if he does not have the answer, he has the team to go find the answer. So we will try to get back to you right away. Okay, I see that there's a request to recap the context of ROI in the project decision making. ROI for project grantee or for MCEC? Would ROI for grant monies be the environmental benefits? Yes, environmental benefits can be a form of the ROI. What we're looking for is the return on investment to the fund is one criteria. The return on investment for the use of the funds that the state has put out is another criteria. And if there is a return on investment to the project grantee, certainly it's worthy of noting that in the proposal. Mary McCarthy asks, is there a definition of specific geographic areas that are considered low income? Yes, we did answer that. We noted that they are defined in statute by a percentage of income, and that there are links to the EJ tools, both at the federal level and at the state level, that will help map the location of those geographic areas where they are considered low-income communities. I see, is there a precise deadline for the proposals? Yes, on the website, the applications are due by close of business, Stephen, Friday, April 15th, or was the date that we...
Yes, I'll reconfirm.
I'm sorry, we will correct that on the slide and get a very specific date on there. Mid-April, around the 15th, and Stephen, if you'll get the specific information, put it in the website. Will you give feedback to the applicants? For instance, if a grant is requested and the committee would reject as a grant but approve as equity, would the applicant hear that feedback? Yes, the applicant would hear that feedback from us. Our intention is to try to work with applicants to get to solutions. I think, Sandeep, we were trying to address your question also. 40%, Sky Lawrence asks, 40% of the fund is for low-income households. Again, 40% of the fund is intended to be directed at low-income households and communities. If there are projects for small businesses in low-income areas, would they be considered within the 40% allocation? Possibly. I think you should submit it if you have it, and let's look at how we would calculate that. But we are open to all ideas. Are clean transportation and EV infrastructure initiatives applicable? Yes. Nate Weistheimer, let's say you apply for grant funding as a community organization trying to help build clean energy skills and competencies in the community. Do you also want those applicants to try and quantify carbon reduction, which could be a silly exercise? No, I would not want you to go through a silly exercise. However, the use of the funds are intended to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So if you're going to submit a proposal, others that are going to achieve greenhouse gas emission reduction are going to get ranked higher in the evaluative criteria because they're checking that block. So you can submit a proposal that and not have to go through that silly exercise, and we will look at how that could be funded. That's another one that's a good example of, we might turn to our colleagues at the Department of Labor and say, could you help with funding for this one? Or look for grant sources that could help fund that proposal. Over what period of time would reporting requirements, measurements be required? That's a great question, Delina Martin. And we are looking for you to tell us what period of time you would intend to report on those impacts. We have not specified a specific period of time because it will depend on the project. So when you submit, we would like you to tell us what you think would be appropriate. Yes, solar projects are eligible. Jacob Schleifer. I hope I said your name right. A question, does every project that gets funding have to specifically impact low-income communities, or will 40% of the capital in the fund be attributable to projects that benefit low-income communities, as in 60% don't have to impact low income? The answer to the question is the fund writ large. Our intention is that 40% of the funding should impact low-income households and communities, the funding that is used through the fund. That does not mean that every project that submits has to impact low-income households and communities. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, just to clarify, Kathy, the statute defines or is very specific about saying 40% of the fund balance has to be targeted. So as Kathy mentioned, that's sort of in the act itself.
Okay, Jacob wants me to write a haiku here. So I'm thinking, Jacob. In the meantime, if anybody has any other questions, let me just ask you to go ahead and post them as well. I think my answer in 4 to 5 words would be efficiently, effectively impact Maryland. Greenhouse gas reduction. That was more than 5 words, but I'm hoping that that was a challenging, and I've only had 1 cup of coffee. What if the impact on low-income households is indirect? Specify that. Just specify that. You're welcome, Jacob. I think I'm going to look in the chat. We seem to have some questions or some comments in the chat too. Nope, those are just comments from staff. Okay. I'm happy to hang on a few more minutes, and as things come up, if you have any other questions. Otherwise, we will give you back some of your day, and thank you for your interest. I see Nate says, has the committee looked at projects done in other states as effective examples or ineffective examples? We are currently doing that with the committee. We have some presentations in this next meeting, looking at some other states and what they have done using similar investments. But our goal with this, and I just want to close by saying this, is all good ideas are welcome. The goal is to gather up the possibilities and use that to convince the state and policymakers that continuing to invest in this fund to finance these projects and to move things faster forward using these resources and partnering public sector funding with private sector funding is a good investment. So the more we can show demand for the fund, even if we can't finance or fund everything, we are able to go back and say, look at all these great ideas that we could have financed or funded, had we had more resources, and to show what's possible in partnership with the private sector. Things to replicate that already work versus requiring us to come up. You can replicate things that already work in Maryland, that have not been done in Maryland. Yeah, novel ideas are great, but that's not, tried and true is also worth investing in. All right, just a few more minutes and we'll hopefully everybody's inspired and we'll have some great submittals. Please share the video with other colleagues or stakeholders that you think should be aware of this. Stephen's contact email again is S as in Sam, Cowan, CWAN @mdcleanenergy.org. We look forward to working with you. And again, please contact us if you need more information. We have regarding co-investing, co-grant making, would state government departments with other environmental priorities, e.g. reducing air pollution, be eligible to invest in the C3 fund? Yes. 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 Yeah, that would be, certainly this fund is set up as a vehicle through the Clean Energy Center because the Clean Energy Center was created with this mission, and it has some flexibility with its convening capability. We can enter into public-private partnerships in a way that state government agencies may not be as easy for them to do that. We can move quickly, and that certainly is a necessity right now. We are trying very much to leverage the federal grant funds with these state resources. Federal grant may qualify as a co-investment for the project, yes. I would say as you submit your application, show also the value of the investment of your staff time and energy as in kind contributions. We want to quantify that as well. And if you have an idea but don't have all the technical capability in your realm to execute the idea, and you are looking for technical partnerships, we can also help identify some that would be useful to you. There are those out there who are experts at quantifying greenhouse gas emissions reduction, for example, that we can refer you to, and you could put in your budget some funding for that partnership to help you check all your boxes. Well, Sandeep, let me just say the maximum grant amount to the fund itself is $5 million. So we will not be granting $5 million to any one application. That would use up the entirety of the fund that we have right now. So we have not set a maximum or a minimum per project, but it's not realistic to expect that in a pool of applicants that one would get a $5 million grant under the current circumstances, unless we find funding from another source. This is a great question from Sina. Are you looking for a particular stage of technology market readiness? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I think that, again, we're going to have to look at it all within the overall pool of resources that are being proposed for use. And it is up to the Investment Oversight Committee how they would want to address that question when an application comes in. I don't want to discourage anyone from applying. Do you prefer equity with good ROI to grant applications? I do, but that's not to say that that the committee on a one-to-one basis would look at that. Again, our goal is to grow this fund so we can make more investments in other projects in the future as a priority. That was the intention in creating the C3 fund. So that would be a nice thing to have more of the equity type investments versus just straight up, here's the money and it's gone, it's gone. All right, I think we've done really well. I'll just do a few more seconds. Last questions. We had a good attendance today. Again, don't think that we're not available after this, but we will offer to sign NDAs. This information can be protected under the Open Meetings Act for confidentiality, for business competitiveness. We will not be sharing the details of a proposal publicly for that very reason. If you have concerns about the disclosures, and certainly you can inquire about that with Stephen. We will make it NDAs available. I don't know if there's anything else, but it looks to me like we are just about ready to wrap. So at 10:45, we'll call this done. Thank you all again. We look forward to getting your proposals.